We're live and recording. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Jennifer and Amity here. We're going to wait a couple minutes while people sign on and get comfortable and everything, but we wanted to get on and start to see who's chatting away in the chat section, and it looks like a lot of you already. I hope that people who are saying hi in the chat section will let us know where they're from. That's always fun. How are you doing, Amity?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. How are you?
I'm great. So happy to be here too. All right. Well, it looks like we've got about half of our audience now, so I'm just going to start slowly talking and wait for the others to trickle in. But I am astounded and tickled and thrilled to see we've got 142 people registered for this event and counting. It keeps going up, and the counter is getting higher and higher as we sit here. So that's just awesome, and it's really a sign of hope and optimism. And people from all over the place. Amity, do you know there's somebody signed up for this from Ho Chi Minh City?
What?
Yeah.
What time is it there?
I don't have any idea.
First thing in the morning?
But I certainly hope that they'll say hi to us in the chat section.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Welcome. Welcome.
So I'm Jennifer LaRue. I am the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum. And like everybody else, my life has changed dramatically in the past couple months. Tonight was supposed to be a live event. We were so excited to be hosting Amity's hometown book launch for her new novel, Sea Wife. And we didn't want to let that opportunity slide just because of circumstances. So we figured out how to do this here, and we're so thrilled to be able to do that. So thank you all who've registered, and thank you, Amity, for being here with us. It's super nice to see so many familiar faces in the audience, and also so many new people. So hope we are going to remain friends for a long, long time. I'm going to ask a favor of my colleagues at the Twain House. If you are a member of the staff or a volunteer or a member of the Board of Trustees and you're in the chat section, would you please identify yourself, say hi, so people can kind of connect with you, and also see what a show of support you are making for this program tonight. We all really appreciate it. So I want everybody to know the Mark Twain House is alive and kicking. We have gotten ourselves really busy. The staff has jumped in feet first, producing all kinds of online content, most of it free, including tonight's event. We have a 3D virtual reality tour that's annotated, so you can go room by room as if you were really in the Mark Twain House, and you can pause to click on things and learn more about them. That virtual tour just got high praise from Bob Vila of This Old House, who said it was something like lusciously annotated. It was very, very gratifying. So we have things like writing in Mark Twain's library every Wednesday afternoon. If you follow us on Instagram, you can sit and just pretend you're in Mark Twain's library, listening to the burbling fountain, surrounded by the books on the bookcases, and write while you enjoy that surrounding. We have all kinds of activities online for restless kids and students of all ages. We have all kinds of wonderful things in our gift shop, and we have a lot of programs. So tonight is a very exciting night for us. Next Tuesday night, we're hosting our friend Rand Cooper, who's going to read an essay that he wrote called Listening to Restaurants. And it's kind of an ode, a love letter to restaurants at this time when we all miss our restaurants so much. That one also is free, and we hope to see some of you there as well. And then this Thursday night, very special guest, Jan Karan, the author of the beloved Mitford Years series of novels, of which there are now 14. She's very graciously agreed to do a fundraising event for us. So she's going to be talking with our other friend, Lauren Yarger, on Thursday night. That one starts at 6. And that one is not free. That one costs $20 because it is meant to be a fundraiser. As I said, most of the things we're doing are free, but it's very important for people to understand that the Mark Twain House and Museum is a private nonprofit organization. We are not primarily funded by the state or federal governments. We rely almost entirely on earned revenue from our tours, our admission for the tours, the fees people pay to take part in our public programs, and on donations. And so these are rough times and everybody needs money and everybody is torn in a million different directions. And obviously not everybody is in a position to be able to help out. But if you are, I want you to know that any donation, large or small, that you can make to the Mark Twain House and Museum, all these staff members that you see chiming in here, the staff, the board, and the volunteers will very greatly appreciate your help. And I speak for all of us by saying I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I want to also take just a moment to thank the helpers out there, all those people who are doing all that work that allows us to have the luxury of spending this time together the way we are this evening. So anything any of us can think of to do to make their lives easier, to let them know we appreciate them, let's all do it. I want to make sure you're aware that this dude, Sean Orcutt, who keeps showing up in the chat over here, he's actually a staff member, a colleague of mine, and he's just helping to monitor things tonight from behind the scenes. So he'll be interacting with you as we move along. Enough of me now. I want to talk about Amity. Amity is a dear person, a dear friend of the Mark Twain Houses, and we are really tickled and honored to be hosting this event in honor of her brand new, April 28th, was it published, Amity?
Mm-hmm. 1 week ago.
1 week ago. Her fourth novel, Sea Wife. So her earlier novels are Oh My Darling, The Folded World, and Schroeder, all very critically acclaimed, all very wonderful. She is a 2016 recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship. That doesn't happen to everybody. And she teaches at Yale. She is, is it Mary Poppins who said, she is positively perfect in every way. And so we are delighted to have her here tonight. I have the pleasure of being the person who gets to chat with her throughout the evening. And just a couple quick more pieces of housekeeping, and then we're going to start talking together. If you look at the bottom of your screen, everybody, there is a place where you can ask a question. We are going to have Q&A at the end of our talk, and it's much easier. Your question will not get seen if it's in the chat section. It will get seen if it's in the ask a question section. So if you do have a question you'd like to pose to Amity at the end, that's where to do it. We have a little poll for you to answer if you're so inclined. And that big green block beneath mine and Amity's faces is an opportunity for you to donate if you are able and willing. And again, that would be most appreciated. And finally, in the chat section, Sean is posting and reposting a link that allows you to purchase Sea Wife through our museum store. Those purchases benefit the Mark Twain House and Museum. And Amity has very graciously signed book plates so that every book that is purchased will come with a book plate with her signature on it. So that's very exciting. All right. Shall we get started, Amity?
Sure. I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Jennifer. It's an honor to be doing an event at the Mark Twain House. This was the one I was looking forward to most of all. So it's a national treasure. Please do buy a book through the Mark Twain House and donate, as Jennifer was saying. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. So how are you feeling? I mean, congratulations, official congratulations. This is your fourth novel. It's getting rave reviews and everywhere. It was People Magazine's Book of the Week, and the New York Times picked it out to write a special blurb about how everybody should be reading this as a means of escape from this COVID-19 thing. I mean, you must be floating.
Oh, it's really beautiful to feel the response and finally hear the response. I worked on the book for 6 years. So you wait for this moment where people start to tell you, certainly the critics, but also just readers, which you get those as well, the reflection from people, to have somebody say, as a neighbor said to me the other day, that a line she read made her feel seen, and that made me so proud and also just moving to finally have connection with the readers. Now, this is not the connection I was hoping to have with the readers. I really miss you. And it was, of course, it's not ideal circumstances to publish a novel. And when I first, when we all went into quarantine, there was about 2 weeks in which I was absolutely furious. And, after, after all the trials you get through to publish a book, and then you're kind of at the 1 yard line, things fall apart, and I was sad and self-pitying. And then, I realized I started to hear that people were reading fiction. Fiction sales are actually pretty good, and nonfiction less so, but people want to read fiction. And that actually, it genuinely makes me feel better. Because they feel useful. And I think you're right that the book itself does have some resonance with with this moment when we spoke about that earlier. And I had to read the book again myself recently to get ready for interviews. And so I hadn't read it for a while. And when I was reading it from the middle of quarantine, I was like, this is so weird. It's so relevant. It feels, because the book is about a couple who take their 2 young children out on a boat and to Panama, cruising in Panama for a year is the plan. And I really feel like I'm on a boat with my family these days. And so much of that, I'd say I didn't write it with that in mind, but it really has a sense of relevance to the moment. And also the idea too, that when, I noticed that pre-pandemic, I was able to keep my roles very separate. Like, I'm a mom now I'm a writer, now I'm a teacher, and now it's all just one big mix, and we're all in one big goulash together, and all of these households all over Hartford, all over the country. And I'm really relating to that feeling of being on a boat with your crew, and ideally getting to know one another, I think, more honestly.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And you and I did talk earlier in the week about the fact that I've now read Sea Wife twice. I was lucky enough to get a galley when it first was in galleys, and I loved it, and I couldn't put it down. It's such a page turner, and it's so engaging. And I'm talking a minute about just the beauty of the language and the compelling, precise language that you use. But reading it again just now in preparation for this was an entirely different experience. And always when you read a book for the second time, it's different, and you see different things. But this, first of all, it did provide that sense of escape to these thrilling locales that I'm never going to see in my life, probably. And the thrill of being out on the open sea and all of that I just adventure and new vistas and things. So it was very rewarding in that regard. As you said, yes, there's that whole sense of being on a boat and being confined in a whole different way. I also have to say that I kept finding myself, there's a lot of interaction among people and the physical and close nearby, and people getting on each other's boats and stuff. And I was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that, because this social distancing thing has already ingrained itself so fully in so many of us that it's just a very interesting thing to have read it a second time. But I'm so grateful that I did, because I saw things in it that I hadn't necessarily the first time through. I want to ask you about a couple of things, if I can.
And did you want me to give a little reading?
Yes. Do you want to do that? Do you want to do that now, and then I'll ask?
I would love to give a little reading. As you know, Jennifer, one thing that I think is kind of interesting about the book is that there are 2 voices in the book, and you can see it. It's a beautiful book. I know I'm biased. Beautiful. Look at the end papers. They never do that anymore. Yeah. But there's 2 voices, and it's Juliet, the wife, mother, woman figure, and Michael, her husband. And so in order to read this book, I genuinely need another voice. And I just so happen to have someone at hand. Oh, look. Here's Tim Watt. This is my husband. And he has been very generously agreed to be my fictional husband. He's both my husband and my fictional husband tonight. And he's reading the part of Michael. And Tim is Doctor of Literature, beloved teacher at Avon Old Farms, go AOF, and my first reader and my best friend. Really, really means a lot to me to have him just being with me in this moment is maybe a silver lining of doing this Zoom reading.
All right, let's do it.
Welcome, Kim. Thanks for helping us out. How about if I switch off the screen then and let you guys fill it fully, and I'll hop back on when you're done?
Yep, great. Thank you. Okay, we're just reading from the beginning of the book. Where does a mistake begin? Lately, I've found this simple question difficult. Impossible, actually. A mistake has roots in both time and space, a person's reasoning and her whereabouts. Somewhere in the intersection of those two dimensions is the precisely bounded mistake. In nautical terms, its coordinates. Did my mistake begin with the boat or my marriage itself? I don't think so. I now suspect that my mistake took root in an innocent experience I forgot to decipher, the mystery of which has quietly ruled me. For example, I remember standing beside a blindingly blue Howard Johnson's motel pool at 12 years old, watching a couple undress one another through the half-drawn curtain, while my estranged father disputed the bill in the lobby. Should I have looked away? Did the miscalculation occur even earlier, as I sat on a rope rug in clean kindergarten sunlight, and I leaned toward the boy beside me and accepted his insistent whisper? I still feel his dew in my ear. And now I'm sitting in a closet, Michael's closet. I should explain. Several days ago, I came in here looking for something of his and discovered that the carpet is very plush. The slatted bifold doors filter the sunlight beautifully. I feel calm in here. Hiding in closets is the habit of children, I know. I used to hide in my mother's closet when I was a kid. Her closet contained some dressy silks and wools she never wore. I loved holding these fabrics against my body or stepping into her high heels as if onto a dais, rehearsing my future. I never felt ashamed. Surely there's some connection between seeking refuge in my mother's closet long ago and hiding in Michael's now, but that insight does not help me. Sometimes life just writes you tiny, awful poems. To be honest, I am uncertain whether or not I can survive this day. I mean, if I want to. To go outside requires preparation and composure. If I were to go out, to start walking around and seeing people again and going to the grocery store and getting on with it, invariably what someone would ask me is, do you wish you'd never gone? They will expect me to say, yes, our journey was a mistake. But I do not regret saying yes to the boat. Saying yes to the boat was my clearest act of loyalty toward my husband. I can't afford to regret it. If I did, I would only be left with my many disloyalties.
January 17, 10:15 a.m., log of yacht Juliet, from Porvenir toward Cayos Limones. 9 degrees, 33.5 minutes north, 78 degrees, 56.98 minutes west. Northwest wind, 10 knots, seas 2 to 4 feet. Notes and remarks. We are 102 nautical miles east-northeast Panama City, catching prevailing winds into the sovereign territory of San Blas. The shape of the coast is still visible behind us, but ahead is just water. Nothing but water. That's when I realized there's only one ocean, one big mother ocean. Yes, there are bays and seas and straits, but those are just words, artificial divisions. Once you're out here, you see there's just one unbroken country of water. You'd never feel this way on land, not in our country. What a feeling. Generations of sailors have failed to describe it. So what are my chances? Me, Michael Partlow, who can't tell you the title of a single poem. Just ask my wife. Her head is full of them.
When I first met him, I thought I'd never marry a guy like that. Too persnickety, too conventional, no sense of humor. But I was wrong. Marriage and kids and the grind made Michael morbidly funny. He got funnier and funnier, while I, who had been funny, got less funny. There was this ratty muscle shirt to which he was superstitiously attached when we were living aboard the boat. The memory of this shirt makes me laugh out loud. While sailing in hot climates, you start wearing as little as possible. In cruising kids, they dress like lunatics, wearing grass skirts under flamenco dresses with muck boots and shell necklaces, mementos of places they've been. I have no idea where Michael got the muscle shirt. Panama City, standing ashore, beaming with his boyish face and unwashed hair, he looked like a prep school kid who'd gotten lost on a hike 20 years ago.
The crew of our vessel is fit and in good spirits. Boatswain Sybil Partlow, age 7, is sitting in first mate Juliet Partlow's lap in the cockpit. Deckhand George Doodle Partlow, age 2.5, is doing his best to stand upright in the small swell. He's pantless, waiting for first mate to let him whiz off of the side of the boat. His growing vocabulary is strictly maritime. Fish go, boat go. A very large sea turtle just surfaced port side, head like a periscope. Sybil says it's a spy. Whenever Sybil says anything cute, she tells me to write it down. That turtle's a spy. Write that down in your book, Daddy. Pardon me, I say. Are you speaking to me? What do you call me underway, bosun? She laughs. Okay, write that down in your book, Captain.
The muscle shirt was so funny because he's normally such a neatnik, a dandy, and a rearranger. He needs almost no sleep. His mother said he'd always been that way. Here at the house, he used to work late into the night, sending emails and finishing reports, but mostly man tinkering, learning about electrical wiring by gutting another appliance or making little toys for the kids. In the morning, he'd leave for work as shiny as an apple. He wouldn't let the children eat in his commuting car. Goldfish, Triscuits, verboten. But the family car, my car, lawless, a layer of organic material composted under the seats. I understand it now, sitting here. I understand how nice it must have been for him to have a little fiefdom, a closet, where shoes are paired and the world is shut out and you get to make all your own choices. My closet, just there on the other side of our bedroom, is haphazard. I gave up trying to neaten it when Sybil was a toddler. After months of hanging them up, I just left all the blouses on the floor where she'd pulled them off the hangers. She'd shuffle out of the closet in my shoes, unsteady as a drunk, and leave them under tables and sofas. But I'm a mother. Gradually, I just gave them all away, all my spaces, one by one, down to the very last closet.
I know it appears that what we are doing is radical, but the truth is there are so many people out here, sprinkled all around the hydrosphere, sailboats, sloops, catamarans, replicas of famous scooters, wealthy paranoids, retirees, people traveling with cats, people traveling with lizards, people sick of giving 1/4 of their income to the government, free spirit, charlatans, and yes, children. There are thousands of children sailing this world as we speak.
Let me begin by saying that buying a boat was the most absurd idea I ever heard. I'd never boarded anything but a ferry in my life, and Michael hadn't sailed since he was in college. You've got to be kidding me, I said to him. You want me and our 2 little kids to live on a boat with you in the middle of the sea? Just for a year, he said. I don't even know how to sail, Michael. You don't need to know how to sail, he said. All you need to know is which way to point the boat. I can teach you the rest as we go. You're insane, I said.
Naturally, it took a long time for Juliet to come around to the idea. More than once, she pointed out that my father died when he was just a little bit older than I am now. So maybe I was feeling something breathing down my neck, i.e. eternal quietus. And she could understand how spooky that might feel, but maybe could this particular psychodrama be solved with something less extreme, like a triathlon? I don't disagree. She was right. Every marriage needs one skeptic to keep it safe. But a marriage of 2 skeptics will fail to thrive.
I do know a lot of poems. From all those hours in my carrel at Boston College, trying to write my dissertation before we moved out to the land of steady habits. Ironically, one reason I gave up studying poetry was because it seemed brutally impractical compared to the urgencies of raising 2 children. But these days, inside my closet, poetry is as real to me as an axe. I need it more than food. Lines come and go in my mind. I don't even remember who wrote them. I eat very little, mostly just dinner with the kids, and I lap from the bathroom tap when I'm thirsty. During the day, when I have to leave the closet, I push open the doors and cross our carpeted bedroom in my socks. When I return to our bedrooms, sometimes I linger by the front windows where birds mob our blighted apple tree, not realizing they can be nakedly seen through the leafless branches. I spy on them, just as the occasional curious neighbor spies on me. Our plain white house is now a point of interest. It's been on the news. I see the way people walking past our house slow down and how, in pairs in the evening, they exchange a somber look. Vivas to those who have failed, and to those whose war vessels sank in the sea, and to those themselves who sank in the sea. It's true, history is written by the victors. That's why we need poets to sing of the defeats.
Oh boy.
Thank you, Tim. He's going down to feed the kids.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. Wow, that was a really perfect selection, because it gives us a way to start talking about so many things going on in this book. I can't remember the last time I've read a book that had so many different things going on in it. One of the things is it's called Sea Wife, and so Juliet is clearly the protagonist, but Michael is equally rendered and equally important character in this story. And I'd like to ask you just a little bit about how you, as a woman, a mother, a writer yourself, were able to get so fully and empathetically into the head of a character like Michael, who, as the passage you just read, you and Tim just read, indicates, has politics that differ radically from Juliet's, and are a little tricky to deal with. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. I started, it takes a long time to write a book. As I said, it takes 6 years. And over that course of time, things happen to the author. And one thing that happened when I started writing this book, I started with just the vision of a tiny little boat crossing the vast sea, as seen from above, in a way. And that was sort of the image that I started with. And then I put a family in the boat, and that family, and then it sort of almost became a little bit allegorical, as sea journeys sort of are, because it is such a difficult thing to cross the sea, and there's always trouble. So I started with this image, and then as time changed, things happen. There was the election. There's been so much political upheaval. No matter which side of that you fall on, there's an intense amount of emotion and polarization in this country. And I was trying to write my sea story, and in some ways kind of trying to separate that, keep that story separate from the culture, the political culture. And then I realized, at some point, that my married couple, even though they have, I think, very commonplace stressors that I see in my life and all around my neighborhood, my friends, the difficulty of raising little kids and working, the stress of modern life, they do have, I began to see that they had a real political difference with one another, and that actually ends up stressing them most of all. And it becomes very relevant in a crucial moment out at sea, when they really sort of debate about something that's definitely happening right now, which is, do you trust the government? Should there be a strong federal government or not? And should you ask for help and for things like, the Coast Guard? And so it really became their political beliefs, as all of ours do, are deeply, they both deeply believe it. And since obviously I don't share both of their political beliefs, I had to learn how to sympathize. I think that I was kind of trying to do a spiritual exercise where I could sympathize. The character I needed to sympathize with was Michael, and he's a man, so I'm not. So I had to sympathize with him in that way, and then I had to also sympathize with why, the fact that he believes his political beliefs just as dearly as Juliet, and just as dearly as I do. And I knew that if I was going to try this book where I had two narrators and they both share the page, and I agree, it really is Juliet's journey. It's really her story, because she's really telling it. You kind of find that out later, that she's reading his logbook, but she, it's definitely her story. But I had to make Michael as compelling a character as Juliet. And why would I ask a reader to read a book where half of the one person isn't supposed to be taken seriously? And he can't, I knew I couldn't make him like a chump or anything like that. And it was very valuable. So some things I did was find things we agreed upon. There's a lot of things I agree about with Michael. And sometimes I got impatient with Juliet, and her passivity in the way that, well, and she struggles with, kind of captaining her own life. So I did need to take both characters seriously, and I hope that does come through.
Well, it absolutely does, Amity. And I would say, just for that reason alone, this is a book that everybody should read right now, because it's so rare to have both sides humanized equally and honestly, and as you say, sympathetically. And I think it would help people find some common ground. As you say, you found with Michael, though his politics were not yours or Juliet's. And I found it very refreshing and very rewarding on that basis alone. So
well, I think there's also, you can thank you for saying that. I mean, it's also the way, I mean, the Democrats was never mentioned in the whole book. It's just this sort of undertone, but it was so natural, because really it was like, it's easy for me to see the way a marriage works in the same way as a nation or as a community. And the dialogue is important in a marriage to keep it healthy, and a dialogue is also important in a nation. So that's how the two of them work together, hopefully, naturally.
Well, that is a hugely important part of this novel, but it's only a fraction of what's going on in this novel. And I don't want to monopolize and make people think that this is all about people with different political beliefs, because at the most basic level, this is about the sea and sailing. And I just was so taken by the beauty of the very specific nautical language that each word, and Mark Twain would have loved this. He has that quote about the right word versus the not right word is the difference between the lightning and the lightning bug. And you got that distinction right every single time. And I just, you learn so much about the beautiful, compelling language of the sea. Can you talk about the research that you had to do, not only to master that language, but to master the craft of sailing and to be as knowledgeable as you clearly are?
Oh, well, thank you. It was extensive. I mean, I am not a sailor, and I don't have sailing experience. So it's pretty much insanity that I tried this out. But again, I think I was on a spiritual, personal, and artistic search. And so I knew that in order to render sailing convincingly, I had a lot of work to do. And the reader is very sensitive to small mistakes. I mean, the reader's not like, readers are all different, but in my experiences in my fourth book, that they can get very unsettled by some factual error or lack of something that's incredible, hard to believe. And absolutely, I feel the same way when I'm a reader, because you don't want to be shaken out of the dream that you're in. The dream is so captivating. We love it. And everybody probably here is a reader and knows what I'm talking about. So I had a big task in front of me. I started with reaching out to families, some sailing families. They're actually a great number of people who do raise their kids at sea. I just found this fascinating. And I, it's amazing how many of them agreed to talk to me. And I got very close with one family in particular. That family let me come onto their boat. We would go sailing, day sails out in Rhode Island. And then we just kind of moved. They eventually ended up getting a house, and we would sit and talk about things. This family, they're the Zartmans, they had 3 beautiful daughters that were raised on the boat. And I could observe these girls and see the way, Jennifer, you've read the book, the certain things that they do, like they fly on the halyard, and they surf on the tables, and when the boat is underway, all these little details. So I was really an observer. But then there came a point where I understood, of course, that I could not just write the book vicariously. And my fictional family and me are very different from the Zartmans. The family that I was researching, they were naturals, and they were, they had it all figured out. My fictional family did not. They live in a street just like mine. And as Juliet says in the reading, had very little sailing experience. They did it spontaneously, and they did it to try to feel free. And I completely honor that. I I think that's a good reason to try things. But the result is that you get into situations that you may not know how to handle. I had to feel that. So I ended up eventually going to a sailing course by myself down in Grenada, an island nation, not where the book is set, but close, the same gorgeous, peacock blue skies and water. Beautiful. But in during the course of the sailing course, even though it wasn't hurricane season and I don't think I did anything reckless, it was still tremendously terrifying. And there were moments where we ran into weather, and one night in particular, there was a microstorm, and I remember coming out of my berth and like catching the captain looking up kind of worriedly at the sky, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to die. I'm going to die. And I was like, and all for a novel. Like, I didn't really have to come down here. And, I became very, very religious. And that night I was like, dear God, please, I was just kidding. I don't really need to do this work. But we survived. The captain ended up handing me a bottle of Captain Morgan's and also just telling me, oh yeah, I'll figure it out. I'm totally under control. It's totally under control. And I was like, it may or may not be under control, but guess what? I don't have a choice. I'm on a boat in the middle of a storm. And, feeling that seesawing mattress, feeling that hearing the wind in the rigging, not just during the storm, but during all of it, feeling as soon as the boat, you get out of protected area and the boat just heels, and you're looking down into the water like you're just staring into this frothy sea. It's so powerful. It's so exciting. I have a healthy respect and fear and admiration for just sailing, and never. Also, when you're out there, you see things. You see weather in a way you have not ever seen before. Storms coming from a great distance, sun like canting through the clouds. It was so gorgeous. So I appreciate what you're saying, Jennifer, about, there is stress in the marriage and there's stress with the kids, and they're all pretty commonplace things until they sort of meet their kind of their climax. But the rest of the journey, they really do have a quite a beautiful adventure. And whereas I think the temptation would be to say it's kind of reckless to do something like this. I mean, I ended up feeling happy for my fictional family. And the children are fine, by the way. I want to reassure people that nothing bad happens to them. I know it's hard to read about that. You won't have to. But I felt that there was a journey, even for the children, that everybody needed. I mean, my children, like they stare at screens and receive all sorts of problematic images. And these kids were free from that. And they, each character, especially the Juliet, Michael, and the children, though maybe less so the little one, but are on their own journeys. And it is especially for Juliet, it ends up being an empowering journey, not without casualty, but like an empowering journey, because she's trying to recover from depression and sort of shake herself awake. And the trip really does that.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because that was going to be what I said next. Ultimately, there's a lot of bad stuff. And yes, thank you for pointing out nothing bad happens to the kids. In fact, in many ways, this was the best thing that ever happened to the kids, except for the obvious loss that they suffer. But the overriding message by the end of the book is of empowerment. And there's a very beautifully crafted, tacked on at the end almost, interview with an alumni magazine, that the interview with the couple that was done while the voyage was underway. And at the end, the interviewer casually mentions, "Oh, I've always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail." And the husband and wife say, "Do it. You got to do it." And that is the message. And that, again, that resonates so much in the times we're living in now. Life is short. Go out and do what you want to do. And so that, to me, that was one of the most beautiful things about the book.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there was in that Times review, which was so wonderful, she said something about like you feel like you travel, you get to travel, and then you're kind of glad that you have your ground underneath your feet, that you actually aren't doing it yourself, but that you're glad that they're doing it, but you're glad you have the firm ground under your feet. And maybe we need to feel that way right now too. Like, okay, yeah, let's focus on what we have, who we love. I mean, I think that, at the end of the book, it's about trying to not let your personal wounds and rob you of happiness and connection with other people near you. Don't miss that opportunity. I would say that's definitely one of the takeaways of the book.
I agree. So I have so many questions. I want to get to some of our audience questions, but I just want to ask you about one more thing, because to me, one of the most delightful and rewarding and just bountiful aspects of the book is the character Sybil, the daughter who's 7 years old. She is one of the best rendered young characters I've ever read. There is not one unnatural false note in the whole thing. She's never, cutesy or precocious. She's just genuinely interesting. She's a storyteller. She uses vocabulary and her imagination in such vivid and delightful ways. Where'd she come from? How did you Sybil?
Oh my gosh. Well, she comes from partially, at least, my own household. I am a proud plagiarist of my own children. Thank you. And if they're listening, I don't know if they are. Thank you guys. With my last book, Schroeder, I had a little girl, and I would some of the best lines from my son, and now my wonderful daughter. And I actually feel like probably of all the things, I feel like fiction writers can do almost anything if they work hard enough and they get it right, that there aren't really some rules about it. But I think writing kids is probably one of those things that it's almost impossible to recapture a child's logic and their crazy syntax and the way they word things. So lines like there's a line in the book when Juliet's talking about how hard it is to be depressed in front of her daughter, and the daughter comes up and says, "Oh, look at this story I just found in the sky for you," and that was my daughter's line. And another thing is, what did she say? "All the things you say make my heart warm." Very sweet thing. Like, I would never say that. I would say, "Oh, I love you. You're great." But the child has such beautiful, and some of those are, of course, charming mistakes. Like, for example, my daughter used to pronounce the word suffocate, suffocate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm suffocating. It's just so damn cute. And you almost cannot make that up. So I used her lines, and then I also tried to capture the spirit for when I invented that I would sound like her. And
well, I think you pulled it off beautifully. And she's so tender toward her baby brother, toward Doodle. That too is such a rewarding part of the book, because she takes such good care of him and tells him stories to help him fall asleep. I wished I'd had her for my big sister.
I think they do bond. The siblings do bond, right? As I've seen with my kids right now, that bonding too, not without trouble. But,
yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Well, I have so much more I want to ask you, but I do see we've got some questions from the audience. Do you want to take some of those now, Amity?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to click on the Ask a Question area here.
Uh-oh, is that good that you're laughing?
They're very interesting. When you write a long narrative, asks, let's see, who is asking? I can't see the name of the person asking this one. When you write a long narrative, how much do you need to know in advance, and how much do you discover along the way?
That's a great question. I think that writers will answer that one differently. I can talk about this here because for this one, I was swimming my way. Oh God, those are terrible like nautical metaphors or water metaphors, but I was swimming my way through without knowing where I was going. I think I did know that I, of course, well, I mean, I had them on the boat and I had that image of them crossing the sea, and I knew that there would be turmoil and trouble, as there is on any sea long sailing journey. There'd be weather. So I knew that, but I also was very interested, as we were talking at the sort of top of this, about lots of other things in the kind of cultural consciousness, there's marriage and politics and women's health and postpartum depression. And so while I was writing, I would sort of stop and meander on some of those things sometimes too. And what I liked, what I had fun with this book is I had the narrative of the sailing trip, which I think has, momentum to it, and then these little nuggets of stopping and thinking, in which the characters meditate on certain topics, and I think that they need one another. I mean, I wouldn't want, if you want to read the book just like straightforward as just a straight sea adventure, I think the book will frustrate you a little bit with that. Meanwhile, also, if you're just interested in their sort of talking about themselves or each other, there's this propulsive narrative, and you do really want to know, I hope, what happens. So those two things kind of coexist. Anyway, what I wanted was a sense of narrative tension. That's what I wanted. I always wanted there to be tension. Moving from one section to another, I kept thinking of how I could keep this little string taut. But I also really like the idea of waypoints when to answer your question specifically. Like I heard writers say you need to know as far as your headlights could see at night when you're writing a plot. And I think that's lovely. But I also, in this book, to use a nautical metaphor, is a waypoint. And a waypoint is a leg of a much longer journey. And those legs, especially when you're in sea travel or in air travel, are actually totally abstract. They're not like a rock, or since they're in the middle of nowhere. So I wrote as a series of waypoints. Let me get here to this waypoint, and then let me get to this waypoint. And then I might need to stop over here and speculate on this or remember this. And we're just going to go to the waypoints. I know where I'm heading. I'm heading across the sea, and they're going to make it or they're not. And I'm going to go via a series of waypoints. That was really helpful to me to think of it that way.
Wow, that's amazing. That's helpful to people who are not writing nautical novels. That's a great way to do it. And I've learned since who asked that question. That was our friend Rand Richards Cooper.
Hi,
Thank you, Rand. And I'm sorry that I was looking down at my phone. It appears that some people are having a little bit of technical difficulty with their screens freezing. And I just want to let everybody know before we sign off that this whole program is being recorded as we speak. And it's immediately when it ends, I'll have a link to send to all of you. So you'll be able to watch the show in its entirety on your own. So you won't be missing anything, even if your screen is freezing up right now. Let's get another question. Amity, and 4 people want to have this question answered. Amity, you might talk about writing about a depressed person. Were you concerned that it might be a downer for the reader? Where did you find energy in the depression?
That's an interesting question. Writing about depression. Well, I guess a downer for the reader. I don't think the question asker is saying like depression is weird, right? Because I don't know a single person who hasn't suffered it in their lives at some point or another. So for me, it's almost a universal. I wouldn't want to treat it in any pathological way. I think it's quite natural, especially now. It's a sane reaction to difficult things. So I didn't think that would alienate people itself. But I think that's a great question about how do you keep up energy if your narrator's depressed? Because depressive energy is this kind of back. Well, Juliet, she's she starts the part that I read tonight at the very beginning. She's really at the beginning of her journey, and she's in the closet, and she's like, I just don't even think I can go outside. But she's really in grief at that point, but you don't quite know that. And then as she goes on, she develops a lot of insight, I think, about what went wrong between them, what happened to her, and how she became depressed. She has some personal trauma in her background that she's very much suppressed, partially because it was sort of denied when she was a child. She wasn't heard or listened to. And so, and then that kind of beast has to rear its head. And I have to say that, like, it was, as I said a little bit earlier, I think that she is, she becomes quite empowered through it. So it's more like a story of someone who was depressed, who's almost trying to kick it, who almost suddenly finally finds the one thing that maybe she needed. And so I think you have to get through the book, the end, and feel, and to feel that. That's a good question. Also, I mean, frankly, there's a lot of action in the book. She's not sitting around as, I might when I'm depressed eating chocolates. She's really like, she has to pull those sheets. She has to help. She has to help the kids. She has to slop fish guts over the boat. She has to start motors. And there's a lot that she does, and she's quite brave in the end.
Yes, she is. And I will tell you, as somebody, as I said, I've read it twice now, you don't finish the book and think, oh, that was a book about a depressed woman. Mm-hmm. Depression is an aspect of Juliet's character, but mm-hmm. It's not the whole thing by any means. And part of it is it's so fascinating that the way she got past that was through this interest of her husband's that was not her interest. It was not something that she chose to do. And so I just think that makes it a wonderfully complex arena right there. And, I'm sorry, I should be checking questions, but I'm so fascinated by your answers that I forget to look. Okay, I think everybody wants to hear the answer to this. What's your cure for writer's block? Do you ever get writer's block?
Oh my gosh. Cure for writer's block. Well, I don't, if we're speaking about like right now, I think if anyone who can write right now, you're amazing. I think it would be a very, very hard time to try to write. I wouldn't try it. We're living through such change. I would try to read. I would really try to read. And I have been loving my reading life. And so I think this could be sort of an answer too, that I consider reading part of writing. There are times when I have the privilege of being able to write more than I can now. I often do start by reading, just to hit the ground running as a writer and just expect your consciousness to be awake and ready and it's at its best, I think is probably unreasonable. I will read some great works. I have behind me my shelf of favorite books, and pick one of those out and read that. And also I will say that, as I said before, that fiction is doing well. For me, at night we put the kids in front of screens and we read, and that's such a solace. So I'm also really enjoying my reading life now, even though I'm not able to write. So I mean, it might skirt the question in a sense that I don't know, have I ever sat there in a room unable to type a word? No, because I would never try to do that to myself. I think I would be like, there's so much to learn. Go learn something. That's part of being a writer. You need to have stuff to say. You need to be filled with emotion and thought, and so maybe you need to fill yourself up a little bit more before attempting to write if there's nothing there. And then also the classic reasons I think people suffer from writer's block is just self-esteem and bad negative voices talking to you. And those are, as we all know, a lifelong nagging problem that shouldn't stop you.
That was a great answer. Thank you. What are you reading?
Oh my gosh, you didn't tell me you were going to ask me that.
I know, but I'm curious. Excuse me, there's somebody banging at my door, Amity. I have to see. Can you tell people what you're reading, and I'll see what's going on at my door?
Yes, sure. I'm going to answer that now that I can take over the question and change it a little bit. No, I'm going to talk about a couple great books that I read for this book that I really recommend if anyone wants to read other C books. So there's this wonderful book called The Strange Story of Donald Crowhurst. It's a wonderful book about a man who actually was lost at sea. It's a nonfiction book. I really loved, I read several times Mosquito Coast when I was writing Sea Wife. Moby Dick. Okay, I didn't reread it for writing Sea Wife. I'm not reading it now. Also another great book. I read a great book about it recently by my friend Jeff Sanborn. In terms of fiction, that's not maritime. I just read I love Zadie Smith, NW, read it. Lauren Groff's short story, Florida, read it. There's some absolutely wonderful fiction for me, right? For me, I know that everyone's different. You need to read what you need to read, but I like fiction that comes at our existential problems rather than sort of hides or tries to comfort me about those. I just don't think I would be convinced by that, so I love those big stories that deal with, as my friend Jeff said, he said, we read because we want to know what's going to happen to us and how we're going to bear it. And that's how I'm reading right now. And there's so many stories about that. You can always find one.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing a reading list with us. And we all have time on our hands, so probably we'll take you up on some of those suggestions. I think we're going to wrap things up here, Amity, because you have been so generous with your time, and it's been just such a delightful evening. Do you have any last things you want to share with her?
Well, just anyone who's local, it's be well and support the Mark Twain House. Anyone it's a national treasure, so anyone can support it. And remember, there's a calm for every storm.
Oh, Amity, thank you so much. And thank you to Tim, and congratulations on Sea Wife. We're really proud of you and happy for you and thrilled for you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Good night.
Bye-bye.